Welcome to News with a View, hosted by me, John A. Costa. May 30th, 2025, episode 71. This is a second try at this. At the end of the first 52 minutes, my switcher died. So, hate when that happens. Tonight, we're going to do the Supreme Court case with President Trump and immigration. Appeals allows President Trump to continue collecting tariffs. And the Supreme Court sharply limits environmental impact statements. So those are the big three I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to do a quick second show. So, hello to Danielle, Paul, Chris, Rowan, Cannoli. I'm going to go to my favorite camera. We'll jump right into it. The Supreme Court lets, and this is a headline from, I think, USA Today. Supreme Court lets Trump revoke safe haven program for Cubans, Haitians, Venezuelans, and Nicaraguans. Now, in the byline, I say I'll always point this out. The Supreme Court did not let President Trump do anything but enforce the law. The Supreme Court does not make laws. They will give their opinion and ruling on matters where people take a law or an action by the courts that they feel is in contrast or in conflict with the Constitution. Two courts have fought with Trump on most of this stuff with immigration, and they've lost on this one. This is a big key one. So he's allowed to disregard TPS. And TPS was the temporary protection status starting in 2022 by then acting Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas. Mayorkas. Sorry, I murder names. And what the Supreme Court kind of said, Homeland Security didn't have the power to make such a call because there's nothing provided in the laws that allow them to make such a broad effect as they did. They can't do that. So Trump has been, at least for the time being, until this goes in front of the full Supreme Court for an opinion. But right now, 500,000, and they call them immigrants. Now they're not immigrants, illegals that had TPS documentation. And that's going to be a big push on whether or not they'll be able to do this. Honestly, it will be a big push because they just won't be able to do that. They will not be able to make that. They'll not be able to make that argument because there's no way for them. This wasn't invented. This was like the same thing with dreamers and all that nonsense. They just made it up. And there was no basis where they were allowed just to make that up. So this has now been, for the time being, settled. And 500,000 immigrants are now in jeopardy of being deported. On top of what, 350,000 that he already had, and the 1.6 million that were on a deport list that President Biden had been holding but never acted on. And I won't say Biden didn't deport people. They did. Obama did. Clinton did. Bush did. Trump did. Happens all the time. But the TPS and the whole idea of this parolee status doesn't exist anywhere. It was made up. And I want you to take this analogy because two of the justices said that the Supreme Court really botched this up because of the harm they're going to do to so many people that are here and who were given a status. So I want you to take this analogy, and it's an analogy I've used before because common sense makes common sense, and law is the law. I steal $1 million. No one catches me right away. I take that $1 million, I start a company. And that company is now worth $50 million. And I employ my family. I employ people in the town. I do good things. But I'm discovered. And now the government comes in and goes, one, we're going to take the money back, return the $1 million to the people you stole it from, and everything that has been gained, ill-gotten gains, we're taking from you. And, people will say, hold it, but you're hurting innocent people that had nothing to do with this. Yeah, well, that's what happens. It's the fruit of the poison tree. And that's the same thing in this case. You can't make something that's illegal legal. Can't do it. You could change the laws and then say, hey, we can't go retroactively back. Congress changed the laws? No, they didn't. So, President Trump can end this program. And has. There are a lot of people who say that the Supreme Court green-lighted deportations. And again, the Supreme Court does not do this. They just say whether or not the actions of the president follow those of the Constitution and the laws addressed by it. And they're saying that Trump could do what he can do. Now, again, can you or should you be able to do something? Can you do it? Yes. Should you do it? Maybe not. I don't know. In this case, I really disagree with the Cubans being pointed out, because the Cubans live in a regime where the Cuban government is the enemy to us. And we have always said, leave and, we'll figure it out. They can't go to their government and go, hey, listen, I hate it here. I disagree with the government and I want to leave. Now, they did do that at one point. They emptied out their jails and sent everyone here. We got criminals. We got everyone. Remember? What was that? Well, the Mariana boat lift or whatever it was. Whatever it was back in the 70s. We can't do that. But with the Cubans, we always held out, leave, come here, and it's a safe harbor. But we can't tell you, you have to put your big toe on the sand. And how many of those Cubans left and drowned? Haitians left and drowned. People going through South America, coming through our deserts, through Mexico, died because our government said, just get here and we'll give you safe haven. And if you don't think that that was not the case, you better start reading up and looking at things. It got to the point where the government just said, hey, we got to come up with a different way to do this. We just can't have them run across the border. And so they created the parolee and the temporary protection status when we look into them and ask them for their information. And the majority, not all of them, but the majority never showed up for hearings, never showed up again. They just disappeared. Now, TPS was supposed to be where you had to have a sponsor and you had to have housing and you had to have certain, prerequisites. Was that ever done? Maybe some of the times. But I would say, all of a sudden these people show up in Ohio, in some town, overnight. How the hell did they get to Ohio? Well, the United States government flew them in there. And local governments had no idea what was going on. These people just coming in, and all of a sudden, lo and behold, they find Section 8 housing and everything else for them. Oh, where? How did this all happen? It doesn't happen. It has to be a plan. So now it's over. Trump is putting an end to it. Trump campaigned to put an end on it. Trump won. So all the stuff that Trump is doing, the American people voted for him to do this. And yeah, okay, well, he didn't have a mandate. He didn't have anything. I don't care. He's the president. Having won by 60% or 48%. Doesn't matter. You don't get any extra special points for that. He's the president. And as long as he's following the Constitution, have at it. Have at it. And you don't like it? Well, that's just too bad. Too bad. In a second big win for the Trump administration. And this is a big win. Because I still say, in this case, it was close. It really, this was close. Appeals court allows President Trump to continue collecting tariffs. 3 different courts ruled on President Trump's plan over the last 2 days. And finally, the Supreme Court stepped in and said, Trump can continue doing this until it gets to our steps. And we come up with something. Now, 2 lower courts blocked him, and he immediately emergencied right up to the Supreme Court. Which he's allowed to do. And you have people like Rayfield who said that, the Constitution gives Congress the power to set tariffs. That it's not an inherent presidential power. Now, the Constitution, the laws do say, not the Constitution, the laws do say that Congress has the power to set tariffs. But there's a carve-out, there's an exception. And the president is using that, as did Richard Nixon, who the courts found could do it. And as such, it's been vetted. And I don't think these people that are anti-tariff stand much of a chance of winning it going along now at this point. And it will be hard for them. This is a very defining moment with this argument. And I was on the 50-50 side. I didn't totally agree with everything Trump was doing with the tariffs. In certain cases, he could certainly act. China, Russia, Cuba, North Korea, Vietnam. I mean, these were all enemies. I mean, you could even go back and say Japan, and that's exactly what Nixon did, 1971. And you could use the Trading with the Enemies Act or whatever. And you could get there. In this case, it was a little bit more broader because we had Australia, we had Canada, we had friendly nations, Britain, and it's hard to call them the enemy when, let's say, like Australia, Canada, Britain, Japan, and the United States are in the Five Eyes, which, if you don't know what that is, look it up Google it, where we share super sensitive intel with one another. You don't do that with enemies. So, hard to get up there and classify some of these things. So I had some problems with it because, yeah, you could do it, but you really have to, if you're going to bypass Congress, you've got to show your hand. So, it was a very, very good week for President Trump's administration. They got rulings on removing people from positions where these people can't argue any longer that they've been harmed, that it's permanently being harmed. So, and some of those people that he pulled and yanked and fired, I wasn't 100% on board on how he did some of that. But you also have to realize, or at least take into consideration, that President Trump learned a lot from the first administration. That you must strike fast and you must strike hard. Because your opponents, if you give them a heads up of what you're going to do, will then have legal eagles and beagles all over it and fight you every step of the way, and you will not be able to do it because not in the end you'd be able to, but it's the death of 1,000 cuts. And so he learned. And this is where I said the Democrats made Trump a politician. He learned. And as such, he's not going to make that mistake again. He's just going to keep punching. And he'll take his losses. He's prepared for that. You win some, you lose some. But he's going to exercise his power to the max. And he'll make the Supreme Court define that power. There's nothing wrong with that. And I've said it before on my, podcasts. The executive power is only limited by the Constitution. And if it's not in the Constitution, the president's God. In the executive branch to the executive branch. God. He's got God rights. As long as it doesn't conflict with the Constitution. So, Trump has taken a very sizable move in his commitment during his campaigning to move forward on his promises. And I've said it again, and it said 80% of what Trump wants to do is fine. It's going to be legal, and he can do it. 20% will create not a constitutional crisis. People throw that around. No, it will go to the robes, and will have to be decided on really what it means. And again, and I've said it before, I said there are going to be people that are very upset because the president might win some of these. Of those 20%, he has now won a few of them. The biggest one coming up will be birthrights. And depending on how they argue it, and using books and using precedent of all these books over here are all on Constitution. And that's just one of 10,000 books on the Constitution and how state rights and federal rights and how the amendments, letters on the intent, some really great books on that. And it gives you an insight on what the writers of those amendments, what was in their heads. What was the meaning of these words? And I said this before. President Clinton said the word is and it and if mean something in the general public side, but in a legal document can mean something totally different. And I mean, this is why the Clintons were good lawyers. And they had good lawyers working for them who, guided them through that. So, the fact that the Supreme Court is ruling in certain favors, and there were other ones where they said flat out said, no, you can't do it. Nope. So I feel that there's going to be a lot of disappointment coming, and I'm not 100% certain that he'll win the 14th Amendment, even though the Supreme Court said they would listen to arguments on it. Doesn't mean they have to do anything about it. And if they don't do anything about it, well, the status quo stays the status quo. Now, we know that that's not going to be the status quo, that President Trump will go, nope. I want to hear it from the robes. And they're going to push the robes into a spot where the robes don't want to be. But they know they're going there. I was surprised that they said they were going to hear this on May 15th and hear arguments and take it forward to a certain point. And, whether or not they're going to have something by the end of, June, I doubt it. And if they do, it's going to be not in favor of Trump. So, if all of a sudden they're going to come out and say we have a ruling, and we're going to make an announcement, I'd be pretty certain that will go against the administration. But what do I know? All right. The third thing I was going to discuss. Supreme Court sharply limits environmental impact statements in victory for developers. So, what was happening since the 1970s were, I want to build something over here and there's a pond and there's tadpoles in there. Well, I need to do a study to see are those tadpoles food for someone? And if there's food for someone, is that food for other ones? And so forth and so forth. And what ends up happening is that everything becomes an environmental impact study that takes 15 or 20 years. And by that time, the money is run out, they're not doing it, and it gets shelved. And that's not what the environmental impact statement was for. It was not to do that type of halting. It was done so I couldn't build a hotel on a barrier reef on top of the coral and kill the coral. It was done for, I can't build a hotel where seals, that's their only habitat. And you wipe that out, and now you have a chain reaction disaster happen. I can't build wind generators where whales give birth and things of that nature. It wasn't to stop construction of projects that were for, not for industry, but even for the public interest. So, and this was an 8-0 decision. Very strong statement by the Supreme Court. And this is another win for the Trump administration, who has always been fighting on the environmental side to say your laws are too restrictive. It is just a very strong statement to developers to say, now you can go ahead. You still have to do an impact study. It still has to be done, but because of that impact study, doesn't mean you're barred from doing anything. It's the right move, and it could be revisited again. I doubt if it will be. I doubt if it will be. An 8-0 decision, yeah. That's telling you this horse race is over. We have a winner, and this will allow roadworks, and it was mainly on those type of infrastructure that was being halted. This wasn't, I want to build a football stadium on where these birds migrate to. This is not the case. Those ones will still be looked at, but maybe not as, it won't be a dead end story, and it won't take 10 years and 20 years of court cases to push it forward. A lot of this is, written by lawyers for lawyers. So it's very hard to try to figure out where they're going. So, another win for the Trump administration. The other thing I'd like to talk about real quick is the website, fatcatproduction.com. Cat spelled with a K. We're going to be moving that from its current location to another, same address. That domain name will stay the same, but a much easier site to navigate, and a lot easier for me to do because I'm familiar with the coding for it. Where the other one was a WordPress. I never used it. And it was very difficult, at least for me, to go in there and do everything. So, starting in about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, Sundays will be a live show, 7 p.m. till about 10:30. And part of that show will be strictly on things happening, at least at the end. The last 15 minutes of the show will be things of interest in South Carolina, in Horry County, in Georgetown, and things of that nature. A little bit on the local side, on the local political scene, and what's going on. And at least 4 shows a week on the podcast. I was doing them every day for a while. That became difficult because there wasn't enough substantial news going on. It was more of the same stuff, you know. So you're just rehashing, and I'm not looking at Diddy stories, and I'm not looking at Biden's health and or anything like that. I will get on that, just on the people that lied and what was going on with that. The cover up, the cover up. So, all right, I promised this was going to be a short show. This is a short show. It's maybe 35 minutes, if that, 40 minutes tops. With that, I'm going to say good night. Say a prayer. Give to a charity if you can do it. Make sure it's a registered charity, and you go to that charity. Don't have them come to you. Don't be a victim helping a victim. Like I said, say a prayer. Prayer does work. And with that, I'm just going to say I'm going to fade to black and call this a night. I'm going to put this up real quick. All right. Good night, everyone.